Hello, friends. I'm making this short devotion for Good Friday as we journey through Holy Week and we pause here on a day that's usually associated with despair, frankly, with the trial and punishment and death of Jesus, the crucifixion and death on the cross of Jesus. I wanted to share a couple of verses of Scripture with you today and just think about these for a minute or two and how they can dwell with us for the next couple of days as we lead up and look forward to the hope that Easter brings. I want to talk to you today from the Gospel of Matthew. I want to read two different verses. The first comes to us from the 27th chapter, and this is a passage that I've had a lot of thoughts on over the years, but this is Jesus from the cross, some of his very last words. And the Bible records these words in Aramaic, which is the mother tongue of Jesus at the time, but it also translates them for us. So in chapter 27, verse 46, the Bible tells us around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? My God, why have you forsaken me? We hear that cry from Jesus and think of the desolation and the isolation, the loneliness that he must feel. And surely being on the cross was a lonely time. Perhaps you and I, maybe we feel quite lonely and isolated right now too. Maybe we're separated from people we love. Maybe we're surrounded at all times by people in our house and still feel the need to be distanced at different times as well. This passage is really interesting because it's also the first verse of Psalm 22. It's a psalm that Jesus would have known, he would have learned growing up with it. These are his songs of faith. And Psalm 22 is a really difficult psalm. It starts with this cry of desolation. My God, why have you forsaken me? And it goes on. The psalmist writes all these terrible things, feeling so forsaken. But then there's a turn in that psalm. And toward the end of it, all of a sudden, it becomes not a song or psalm of isolation and desolation, but one of victory. And the psalm ends with the psalmist saying that God's presence has been there for generations and will be there for generations to come, and that the psalmist is going to declare God's steadfast, loving victory. And the psalm ends with the cry that he has done it, that God will accomplish God's plans and that God will be victorious. And so even though Jesus is saying these words on the cross that sound so despairing, which I am sure they are, there's a note of victory in them too. And so I wonder if you and I, as we go about our days where we're feeling a little bit isolated, we're feeling despair ourselves. We live in a Good Friday world right now. We know all about that. I wonder if those notes of hope, those notes of joy that still surround us, I wonder if they can break through to remind us that God will be steadfast with us, that God's presence is with us even when we can't readily see it right now, maybe like Jesus on the cross, that we can be sure that just as God has been there for generations past, God will be there for us. God will bring us through this moment too. I want to tell you also, I want to read verse 50 from that same chapter, Matthew 27. Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. Verse 51 says, At that moment the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now, we're no experts in ancient architecture, but we do know that the temple, God's temple in Jerusalem, the inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, where God lived, where only one priest went once a year, it was separated by a great tapestry, a curtain, from a realm that was a little bit more public. So where God lived and where we lived were separated by this curtain. And at Jesus' death, that curtain is torn in two. It's an incredible visual proclamation to us that God is no longer confined to one place, but that there is no barrier between our lives and God. And I hope that that note of hope, that note of triumph, Psalm 22, go and read it from the beginning to the end, that even now on our Good Friday, in these moments of despair in our lives, that they too can end with a note of hope. I join with you in hoping that brighter days are ahead. I offer you God's blessing, and I wish you God's peace. Take care.